coming up. And when we interview our people, they tell us about this. They tell us about growing up in the South. About 50% of my sample migrated from the southern states to Chicago. So they experience a lot of this to a degree. And so what we do is we give a 9-item questionnaire asking about experiences of discrimination. How often were you treated unfairly in stores or restaurants? How often are you harassed or called names? How often do people think you're not smart? This particular scale has been shown to be related to a number of poor health outcomes. Diabetes, hypertension, stroke, obesity, you name it. It's been studied up and down, and it comes out consistently that African Americans report higher instances of discrimination, and it's bad for their health. We even show that it's related to mortality in one of our studies. Yes. It's been used in different ways. It's a Likert scale, so it's your frequency of the experience from never to a lot, something like that. And so we give people this scale, and we get their frequency, their rating. People vary. Some people say, that never happened to me. Some people say, it happens all the time. And we measure this marker in the blood called C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. And what we found was that people who reported higher levels of discrimination had higher levels of this CRP in their blood. So, if you say that this happens to me all the time, we measured the CRP, the levels are really high. Compared to people who said, no, it didn't happen to me that much, their levels were lower. It was a nice dose-response curve. And so this suggests a potential pathway by which these bad experiences are affecting poor health. It's happening through inflammation. It could be. And we know that inflammation is important in Alzheimer's disease. So again, it suggests a potential target to look at. Stress could be a big player in minorities. And so we're trying to do more to look at Alzheimer's as an outcome. We have reported that it's related to worse memory performance on our memory test. It's related to higher blood pressure, and it's related to mortality. Like I said, people who experience this more often are likely to die at a younger age. So it's not good for you to experience stress of any kind. But there's something particularly bad about being discriminated against that seems to be harming minority health. Now let's look at education. This is a picture of education around the 1930s. This is a black, classroom where, there's a teacher with a book and the students are kind of gathered around. And you look here, the white classroom, every student has a desk, every student has a book. Now, who knows if there's a difference in actual quality, right? I'm not saying that this was poor quality, this was good quality, but there's definitely a difference in resource, right? And that can have an impact on how people progress in their education, what opportunities are opened up for them as they get, become adults and get jobs. And so all these things play a role, and we need to figure out how we can assess it. And there's data showing that there's less money, back then, there was less money spent per student on education if you went to a school in the South versus in the North. In the South, southern schools tend to be all minority. They were segregated. So there's objective data that we can get from the census, but we can't. All we can do is ask people about their experiences when they were younger. And that has limitations because people are now they're in their 80s. But when we look at this, when we ask just a simple question, where were you born and where were you living in age 12? This is performance on our memory test. And if you are up high, that means good performance. If you're down here, it means bad performance. And the red are people born in the South or who are living in the South at age 12. And so you can see that they all perform poorly on our memory test compared to people born in the North or who lived in the North at age 12. Now, I wasn't born back then. I don't know how the schools were different, but there's something going on here. But maybe it's not school. Maybe it's diet. There's other things correlated with living in the South and living in the North. But this suggests there's maybe something going on with education that we can tap into. So takeaways that I want you to know for your prevention and your building a healthy brain is we have shown in numerous studies, not just us, across the country, that cognitive activity is good for you. It doesn't matter what color you are. Reading a book, going to the museum, doing crossword puzzles, playing cards, playing chess, whatever it is that's going to stimulate your brain, do that. That's good. It's keeping your brain active, keeping that mental stimulation going. Definitely is seeming to work, regardless of race. Social activity. Being a part of your sorority, that's a social activity. I know it's also cultural, but it's important. It's the connections that we form with other people, and we don't know why it is that people who are more socially active are protected against this disease. But if it's working, let's keep doing it. Get out there, volunteer, do something in your community, and just see your friends, see your family, keep those connections going, and because we know loneliness is a risk factor.
Yes, it is.
Disease.
That's why
so get out there and meet people, do something new. Physical activity. The data have been a little bit more mixed, but people are starting to understand that physical activity is also good for your brain because probably it's good for your heart. Whatever's good for your heart is going to help your brain. So we know that people who are physically active have less cardiovascular disease, less diabetes, obesity, hypertension. All those things I told you were related to Alzheimer's. So, stay physically active. And it could be something just like walking.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and join a gym, and lift weights every day. You could just walk, and that will give you the same benefit. This is an interesting study that we published recently, just looking at people's life space. So we asked the question, how often do you leave your bedroom? How often do you leave, in the past week, how often did you leave your porch? How often did you leave your neighborhood? And the circles kept getting bigger and bigger. And we saw that people who had the biggest life space out here, I think it was leave the town, they had a decreased risk of Alzheimer's. And they declined slower.
I'm going out of town.
Compared to people with this little bitty life space here. They stayed in their bed, probably because they were sick, But something that simple, just getting out of your house, can be a protective factor that we all can do quite easily. You all came here, so you obviously have a bigger life space than the person who stayed at home and said, I'm going to skip that today. So by age 85, I told you we get the brains of our participants, and most of them are white. But by age 85, we know that Alzheimer's disease is present, the pathology, in almost every brain we see. But not everybody gets Alzheimer's. So that means that there's some people out there where the pathology is building up, but they're not showing the symptoms. So what are they doing? How can we learn from those people? There's some resilience factors that they have in their life or their body that's protecting them from the pathology that's building up in everybody. So about 80% have the plaques and tangles. Nearly all have tangles. About half of them have strokes. A lot of people have silent strokes. You didn't even know you had a stroke.
Right.
And then there's a lot of people who have Parkinson's disease. And there's a new protein we just found out about called TDP-43. About 40% of the people have TDP-43. So these brains, they are just riddled with pathology. As you're going on about your life, the stuff is building up. But there's some people who get the disease and some who don't. And we need to understand what that is. Now, I just published a study earlier this summer that got a lot of press because it was about this disease in brains of African Americans. And it was small because we don't have a lot of brains, right? But what I did was I took the brains we had and I compared them to a matched sample of whites. And what we found was that blacks were much more likely to have mixed disease in their brain when they died with dementia. So here I'm showing you, here are the African Americans on this side, and here are the whites. And this big piece of pie here is mixed disease, compared to this little sliver here, mixed disease.
Wow.
So blue is Alzheimer's, plaques and tangles. You can see the whites, when they die with dementia, they're much more likely to have plaques and tangles. But blacks, they have plaques and tangles, they have stroke, they have Lewy bodies, they have the whole mixture when they die with the disease. And why is this important? This is important because we're now making drugs, medications, based on what we see in whites. We're thinking, let's target this blue. Everybody has this blue. But look, no, African Americans are having a lot of this red here. We're going to have other kinds of medications to treat us. So, but we're not going to know that if we're not in the studies.
Right.
So that brings me to this point. you know, a lot of money's been poured into Alzheimer's. President Obama made a National Alzheimer's Project Act in 2011. And so there's been a lot of money poured into this disease now because everybody is recognizing the effect it's going to have on our population. And there's been 4 projects funded. They're called AMP-AD projects. And 3 of the 4 projects include only whites. There's no African Americans in there.
Wow.
So the cutting edge biology is not being done in our population. It's being done in studies of whites. So whatever we find out, it may work for us,
And it
but
may not.
It may not. And if I take my mother, and my mother has Alzheimer's, I take her to the clinic, I'm gonna pay for this really expensive drug. I wanna know, is it gonna work in my mother?
Right.
Otherwise, why am I wasting my time?
And money.
How do you know that it won't?
Yes. What you're doing right now, raising awareness, going back, I mean, most people in this audience look way too young to be even concerned about Alzheimer's. So, you know, but you might have people in your family who are older, who are at least 65, talk to them about being in studies. You know, there's different studies out there. You know, you don't have to do anything at Rush, although we are the best. But, you know, you can be in anything, you know. And Karen in the back, she has information about different trials. You know, we have clinical trials, we have observational studies like the ones I run. You know, there's different things you can be involved in.
Can we sign up today?
Oh, so those 4 studies you can't do anything about. Those are they already gave them the money, they're already working on that. But, you know, moving forward, there are other things that's gonna pop up because they gave us like, I don't know how much money, maybe $200 million or something to do this research. Yes.
The question is, I mean, all of us, we look black on our skin, but we're mixed up with Jews, Italians, and Greeks.
Right.
You know, what about those studies? And, you know, because we're not all black. We all know that we're not all black.
Right.
But what are they doing? And they just categorizing us as this is just black and this is just Caucasian. But what about that circle?
That's a good question. So, I mean, the only way you can really look at that is through studies that look at genes and look at genetic ancestry. And people are doing that. And we know that African Americans do have this mixture, you know, of white, Native American, and African, much more than Caucasian, Europeans. So there are some studies that look at ancestry. But, you know, most researchers believe that race is a social construct, not a biologic construct. And so there's something about the experience. You may not be all black inside, but people see you as black, they're going to treat you as black. And so that experience might be more important than what's inside your body. You know, so that's what we're basing our research on, the social experience.
Okay.
So what's the impact of not being included? It potentially increases your rates of misdiagnosis if you're not included in these studies. It means that clinical trials and treatments may be less informative, and it means that the currently available treatments or interventions may be less effective. So, you know, if you don't learn anything else today, it's that we have to take control of our own future. You know, and we have to make sure that we're counted in this research. You know, yeah, lots of bad things have happened to us in the past, but there are good people out there doing good work, and so we have to partner with them so we can make a difference. And if you are too young now, you must have someone in your family who's not too young that you can talk to. Yes.
I think Loretta's question might be somewhat of the slide here on the chart. Yeah. We fall into the all category. So because that category of all is so much greater than the whites, you know, whites are whites. Blacks are all mixed up. That's probably why we fall in the all.
Well, whites are mixed up too, just not
Yeah,
as
they
much
are.
as African
They
Americans.
are. They got a lot
Yeah,
of
but I
different.
think that this mixed disease, though, I think is more because of the conditions that we have. Because, you know, it's made up of Lewy bodies, it's made up of plaques and tangles and stroke. So I think because we're more likely to have diabetes, hypertension, stroke, those comorbidities land us here with this red here. So when we show up with dementia, we have a lot of other stuff going on. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that we're African American. I think it's all the stuff that comes with us, you know, all the bad comorbidities that we have as a population. And the other thing is that in this particular study that was kind of interesting and fascinating was that when you broke it down, the disease that was most common was Lewy bodies and plaques and tangles. Now, Lewy body disease is characterized by things like hallucinations, sleeping problems, and things like that. And so what we suspect is that people who show up to a memory clinic with a diagnosis of dementia, they're coming because they're having behavioral problems if they're Black. They're not coming because mom is having a poor memory, because we're more accepting of memory loss. We think it's supposed to happen, it's a natural part of aging. But if mom's going outside naked, or mom's, giving all her money away, that's a problem. We're gonna bring mom in. So I think that's why we're seeing these people here. That's why we're seeing these people here with this, this mixed up disease, mostly with Lewy bodies, because it's a biased sample problem. People who show up to the clinic. Yes.
My question is for, when my mother was diagnosed with vascular dementia, she was misdiagnosed for a long time. So it was one of those situations, like you said, where she had a mini strokes, or micro stroke.
Yeah.
And the doctors, the primary cares at that time, we were talking probably 25 years ago, they misdiagnosed her as having Alzheimer's. It wasn't until we got into the specialists where they were actually able to run some additional testing to see it was more vascular dementia.
Yeah.
So my question is, that was 25 years ago.
Right.
Are primary care doctors more astute in the diagnosis of the differences versus?
Unfortunately not, because that's really a decision that's made by a specialist, a neurologist. So the primary care physician, we're still trying to get them just to recognize, Alzheimer's disease. And so we're not at that point yet where they can differentiate, make the differential for the different kinds. And, there's research going on figuring out how we can do more screening in the PCP to arm them with what they need to be able to tell the difference. But we're not there yet. 25 years later.
Wow.
I have a question in regards to this research. I understand your plight in college. I worked at the Institute of Social Research at the University of Michigan. So I know how hard it is.
I went to Michigan.
In order to have us to participate, because of this the experiment and other things that happen, we don't want to do it.
Right.
But because there's such correlation between heart disease and strokes and, cardiovascular disease, has anyone looked at possibly partnering those two, having the research for Alzheimer's linked to the research for heart? Because we will go to the heart specialist.
Yeah.
We'll go have our blood pressure tested. So perhaps if we go there and they take that research and that data and share it across the board, then I think we make it more of a pool of Black people. Because my grandmother was 93. That's why I'm here, because I was trying to determine some of the things I'm seeing in her, possibly dementia, Alzheimer's, or something like that. But she only has an 8th grade education. She's untrusting. And there is no way, I would talk to her, I lose all my breath. She is not going to sign up for the studies because and she grew up in segregated South. She's not going to do it. And so I can't even get her to tell me about civil rights history. They just don't talk about it. They don't share things like that. So I think the best way, unfortunately, is to go underhanded and get it from the other doctor.
No, that's a good point, and we are doing that. There's a large study called the Cardiovascular Health Study, where they've added, memory tests to their study. So they're getting, all these biomarkers for heart disease, and at the same time, they can learn about memory. And it's maybe about 40% African American. So those efforts are happening. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's disease is still a stigmatized disease. So people are not going to flock to do it. But I think as we raise awareness about the importance, we'll get more people interested. And with your grandmother, you said, she might be a friend who joins. That's a lot of my people in my studies, it was through word of mouth. We go to churches and senior buildings to give presentations, but a lot of people, they experience it, they say, it's not that bad, and they tell their friends, and then next thing we know, we're at 750 people. So, because we come to the person, it doesn't seem, and it's an interview. We're just asking about your life and giving you some memory tests. It's really very simple. Yes.
What you also, just piggyback on what you're saying, with African Americans, it's a trust factor.
Yep.
You being a female and somebody brought you in, I can trust you, and we know this. African American older people, they will trust a white doctor, a white woman quicker than they will on their own.
Oh,
It's
really?
I find that with my mother and my aunt and my family members, and I've seen that with other
Yeah.
women and doing stuff in the community. If it's a white woman coming in, it's like, it must be right, it must be good,
Yeah.
and we can take their word for it because they trust them. With us, it's always like, what you trying to steal from me? You trying to get my you trying to get my jewelry. But, you know, and I find that, and you know what she said, it's gotta be a trust factor. And it's like going in the church, if the pastor say that you good people, everybody gonna flock
Right.
to you. If you bad people,
Right, and that's why we've used the church and we get the pastors on our side. Karen Lowe Graham is a deacon at Trinity, and, you know, that has helped tremendously. So definitely trust is a big thing, 'cause even though I am African American, I have rush on my forehead. So, you know, I represent something that might not be as trusting. So I have to earn the trust. I understand that, and it takes time. So I think I need to wrap up, but I'm almost done. What will it take to prevent Alzheimer's disease in African Americans? Dedicated researchers and staff from the community. So we hire people who reflect the community. You know, these people are in their homes, you know, and so we can send white people, we do, but it's much more effective for us, we found, if we send people who look like the people they're studying and can relate and feel comfortable in the neighborhoods. What will it take to prevent? It'll take a lot of money. As I told you, this is an expensive, you know, disease, and so I get my funding from the National Institutes of Health and the Alzheimer's Association, but we also have state funding and private endowments to keep the research going. And then we need volunteers to participate. So, you know, our volunteers have been dedicated for, you know, now going on, I started in 2004, so over 10 years. I just got refunded for another 5 years. So these people, they want to do this. You know, they are dedicated, they're committed, because they want to change the legacy of this disease in their communities. And so I hope that you will join us, you know, at whatever level you can, to keep us fighting in this area. Thank you very much.
There is a listing of clinical trials and studies.
Yep, there's, and also Karen wants everybody to fill this out, and she gave it to you. This is so that we just know who showed up, and if you are interested in being contacted about research.
Oh, good.
Let you know
That was my
what's
question.
going on. If you're not interested, say no, and we will not bother you. But we just want to be able to say how many people we reached today. But yeah, there's a website. You can go to the Alzheimer's Association or go to our website, and you can find out from Karen in the back. There's a host of different studies, different age points as well.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your attention.
That's great. You got number 72. I have numbers down there. I have 70. I got 71. My birth year. Sister has 73.
We're gonna mix it up a little bit and have some fun for a second.